warm welcome to a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta and we are still working from home. Before we begin today, we'd like to take a few minutes to remember Mr. Brahm Vasudeva, former chairman of Hawkins Cookers Limited and founding member of Media Research Users Council India, who passed away last Friday at the age of 84. Mr. Vasudeva was also MRUC India's first chairman from 1994 to 1995. He was the son of H.T. Vasudeva, the founder of Hawkins Cookers. He took over the reins from his father in 1984. After 38 years of service at Hawkins, Mr. Vasudeva retired in 2006. Under him, the MRUC launched its first ever Indian readership survey. Our thoughts go out to his family, colleagues, and friends. On that somber note, let's take a look at what we have in store on today's episode. One of the results of the coronavirus lockdown is the heightened stress on agency-client relationship. As people continue to work from home, how are advertising agencies navigating relationships with their clients? Today, Anant Rangaswami, editor of Melt, talks to Agnello Dias, creative chairman at Dentsu Aegis Network India and co-founder and chief creative officer at Taproot Dentsu, to understand how the pandemic has impacted advertiser-agency relationships. We're also going to find out what it takes to create an ad that connects with consumers during these extraordinary times. So let's dive into the conversation, but here's letting you know that the interview today was shot on Zoom. We sincerely apologize for the patchy stream. On that note, let's get ready to melt with Agnello Dias.
Morning, Agi.
Morning, Anand.
Agi, to build this conversation, I'm going back to something that you and I discussed in some other context. During the lockdown, the client-agency relationship has looked kind of more fragile than it was. So how do you think this relationship can be made calmer, better from both the client side and the agency side?
I think first of all, it's very difficult to benchmark anybody's behavior, including a client, in this period of time, because this period of time or these circumstances have not happened to the human race in history. So it's very difficult to say this is how we should behave. We are creating new rules of human interaction and behavior as we go along, because there's no precedent. But I think if you go back to the first principles of any relationship between an agency and a client, the principles of honesty and trust, I think if both sides realize that actually no one is trying to shaft the other, okay, a client should realize that an agency understands what's happening on the ground and therefore is not trying to release advertising or trying to get a campaign out just to make money. They do understand that the entire supply chain is under pressure. For a client, for an agency to also realize the boat that the client is in, which is nothing he does is going to immediately redeem himself in the short term. It's better they try and engage on solutions that work within this period rather than look long term. So for me, the biggest learning, I would say, is to actually not look long term, to look short term. If we look long term and look at the scoreboard, it's going to look ominous. It's going to look scary. And then we're going to just have knee-jerk reactions to what is looking like the most dispensable parts of the supply chain, like advertising and all that. But if you look at it week after week or month after month, that's at the shorter term goal of what we need to achieve. There's a big role that the agency can play with the client. And I think it's this big prediction of this big imposing cloud that's facing us, which every day almost looks like every silver lining comes with a cloud rather than the other way around. So I think if we are honest and we interact short term, say the next month, what do we do? I think it'll be a far more fruitful relationship than the holistic nature of where we stand today as a relationship. So much like a marriage, sometimes it's better to just work through the difficult patches of a marriage from month to month or week to week, rather than say where were we and where we have come today, because it's always going to look wrong or skewed.
Yeah, Agi, again in a previous conversation, you mentioned about how agency executives, agency professionals have to remember they are also clients sometimes. And if you use that analogy, you will find it easier to understand how clients react or behave. Can you expand on that a bit?
So this comes from the most common articulation of a creative person's unhappiness with a client. And the most common articulation is they do not allow us to do what we want. They do not buy what we do. So firstly, I think for agency creative guys, it's important to remember that a good client is not a client who buys everything that you do. And a bad client is not a guy who does not buy everything that you do. That's a fake way of evaluating any person in a relationship, leave alone a client. But my response to most young creative guys, when they say that we are the specialists, he's called us in to do creative, he should let us do our job. Why is he interfering? Or why is she interfering? Or why are they telling us how to do creative? We don't tell them how to do products. These are like very popular grouses. Is that when you are dealing with a product whose evaluation is subjective, the nature of the client is to be part of the solution. So many times we ourselves as creative guys, we are clients, correct? When we do up a house, when we go to a hairdresser, get a pair of new clothes stitched, or even when we actually give a brief to a film producer or a director, we are clients in that situation. How many times do we leave everything to the interior guy saying you're the expert, do up the house like you want, or you're the master of attire, so you decide what I should wear. We want to know everything that they do, and we want to have a say in it. So that at that time we don't behave like the clients that we want to behave with us. And same thing with directors. We want production notes, pre-production notes. What are they going to use? We don't say, you're a great director, so I leave it to you. You handle it the way you want. So the nature of partnership art, the nature of partnership creative is that the what and the how come together. And sometimes the what decides the how, and sometimes the how should decide the what. So you can never say, for example, that a client should just have complete faith in you and leave you to do what you want, because he is a partner in what you're doing. He's not a briefer or a client in that sense. He is somebody who's asked you to go into partnership with him. He's not somebody who's employed you. And if you go into partnership with anyone, you will build up each other's strengths.
Right. Agi, can you flip this and tell me how the client should revisit himself? Now you've told us how the agency should put themselves in the shoes of a client in another context. Now, can the client put himself as a vendor in some other context to understand the agency better?
So in the new wave of clients or marketeers that I've seen, some of the few things have not got passed down to them. For example, every time you go out to a creative agency to do a piece of creative, they are making something new. They are manufacturing something new. There is no mold. There is no, you can't say, for example, the way you did that campaign, do my campaign. It's not. It's the whole thing. The whole ecosystem of that campaign is different, including what product it is. So actually, a creative guy is making something new. And however reassured or self-assured he may feel, he's also, to start with, groping in the dark along with you. So when you are making something new, it is very, very important to be honest about what you're going to achieve. And from there comes the simple principle that I say: a good client agency relationship is called a relationship for that reason. It's not called a partnership, because in a partnership you build of each other's strengths. In a relationship you expose each other's weaknesses and find a way of working through that. So even for a client to say entire bucket list of what a campaign should achieve is not being very honest, and for an agency to say that we will achieve all that is both not being very honest. Now both know that they are not being honest with each other, but for the sake of the system, for the sake of a series of tick boxes on a brief sheet, we go through it and say it will do this, but we actually know it will only do this and this. And eventually when we create a product, we will say it is done only this and this. And then we move on to another relationship where this one would have left permanent scars on both sides. But it is important in a brief, I think, for a client, or important in a discussion, to outline very clearly what they do not feel the campaign should do, what they are okay with the campaign not doing, what they are all right with the campaign not achieving, because then that is being really honest. Otherwise, there is 10% of this and 20% of that and 30% of this and 40% of this. Well, we'll agree to it, but it won't. We both know that we are being dishonest. So I always say, a horse created by consensus is a camel.
Right.
So it does everything actually. It survives a desert. It survives tough times. It can walk far. It has stamina. It can live long. It can give you milk, but at the end of the day, then you should be ready to say, I am okay with not having a horse. You should not look at somebody else's horse and say, why couldn't I have that? Well, they took a clear decision about what they would not do, and that's the reason why they had that. Either they took it or the decision happened by default.
So, you use the word analogy. A relationship. You've also taken the marriage as an analogy. Do you think there's a need for a marriage counselor in this relationship?
I think the social taboo that comes from a genuine marriage, at least in India, is so strong that counseling becomes a need of the hour. But in a client agency relationship, there is no great social taboo and separation. Okay, it's not like the end of the world. So I don't think both parties would take to a counselor very kindly, because they would seem to know everything that they know about a relationship with each other, and walking away is not such a big deal as in a real marriage.
Right.
And therefore, I do not know whether it's necessary. I do not know what a third person can outline in this kind of a situation, but I feel that they may not take to it very easily. The
Right.
intervention of a third counselor,
Right.
of a third party.
Again, coming to current times, I've seen a lot of work, every piece of work which is produced by Indian agencies during the lockdown. And the cynic that I am, most of the work is absolute rubbish. Now, but you make a big sort of noise on social media, you spend some money, and then you wonder why the film didn't work. So tell me, why is a lot of work made during the lockdown actually not good work, though it looks good?
On a side note, it's interesting that you touched upon social media, because I think we're living in an era where we need advertising to advertise the advertising.
Right.
Okay. So most social media I see used for a campaign is not actually for the product, but for the campaign itself. And I think an advertising campaign that needs another advertising campaign to advertise itself is a sign of a weak spot in the thinking of the campaign. Coming back to what you said, within this time, I think when the bar is raised so high that you can walk under it, the pure fact that you technically created a film that can run and qualifies as a film rather than a good film is now the new norm, because we've actually highlighted and sold the difficulty in the process as an achievement of end creative. So most agencies and most production houses have built up the impossibility of the process, or the difficulty of the process right now, to execute creative to such an extent that anything that qualifies as video is now seen as a reasonable achievement. I think why are we actually going out on a limb to promote this? I think that's by force of habit. We go out on a limb and promote everything that we do. An advertising campaign that didn't have a social media campaign to promote it is seen as one that had a miss in some manner. But yes, I think the lay consumer who's watching television he does not know how difficult it is to shoot. He does not know how difficult it was to shoot to start with. So for him, most of this is water of a duck's back. I don't think it even matters to him. He just sees the ad and likes it or doesn't like it. Yes, there aren't too many great ads right now, but for many categories, I think being out there is perhaps sometimes more critical than getting it right. And very often we have to choose between doing what is good and doing what is right. We would like them both to be the same thing mostly, but sometimes doing what is right becomes more important than doing what is good. So I think it's a substandard kind of evaluation of the work we do. And once again, we come back to honesty, rather than all of us being honest about the fact that this is actually not the best that the industry can produce. but this is what we need to do now to keep the engines running, and keep doing what our clients need. We by force of habit go out and celebrate it like it was a traditional good campaign that we have done in good time. So right now we're running the handicap Olympics. It's a significant achievement, but the world will still want to see the pure Olympics.
Right. So, Aggie, to build on what you're saying, John Hegarty wrote in one of his books that technology is the handmaiden of creativity. And, to build on the last question, people are talking about the technology rather than about the creative. They're talking about technology rather than the idea. They're talking about technology rather than the insight. How do you get both sides, the marketer and the creative, to evaluate a film based on, does the film work with the consumer?
So I think we should use technology. Technology shouldn't use us.
Right.
Right now, technology is using us. In the absence of a pure creative story to sell to a client, we have no choice, I guess it's survival, to fall back on other aspects of the process that we position to the clients, because we would pick the most glamorous, the most engaging aspect of the process and sell it to the client. So if the film is going to be okay, then we might as well sell the strategy, which is a lot of the new work that wins in the big case study phenomenon at Cannes, where you actually make a great film for the strategy, and even if that film for the strategy is better than the creative, you're through. So similarly in this process as well, if the technology used to create is actually more interesting and more attractive to a smaller audience like the client and you, we tend to do that rather than worry about the bigger picture, the largest tick box that has to be ticked, which is engagement with consumers. So how difficult it is to make a film, how difficult it is to shoot, how difficult it is to edit, how difficult it is to present and engage and brainstorm virtually, all of these are tick boxes. But all these tick boxes are inside one very large box, which is, does the consumer like it? If he doesn't like it, all these others don't matter.
And I'll come to the last question to close this conversation. Is the advertising business, is the product delivered by advertising agencies more important today, less important, or as important as it was pre-lockdown?
It is more important today, but it will have to take or play second fiddle to a very large social problem that stares us. And that large social problem is going to be unemployment, which the true picture has not emerged yet, and it's going to emerge in probably September or October, when it becomes inevitable or okay to now reveal how bad the impact is on people. So I think for most brands, advertising can play a bigger role now than ever before. But I do not think that it will do it in the conventional. It can do it in the conventional manner that says, oh, keep building your brand and people will keep buying your product. I think advertising has to play the role of a positive force in society, which makes people feel like it's okay to go out and actually spend money on something that you really need, rather than freeze. Because right now we're in a situation of paralysis, both the consumers and the marketers. Just freeze and watch. But actually, if you're strategic enough, advertising can play a role in making people more optimistic and make people feel that there is a better tomorrow and all will be well one day. Because I don't think as many people don't have the money to spend as much as there are people who don't think they will have the money to spend tomorrow. So better not spend it now, even if we can afford it. And I think that part is where advertising can play a role. And people who generally don't have the money to spend, they obviously come first and they take precedence over advertising or marketing for that matter. But for all the other people who do have the money to spend and who are scared and worried and pessimistic and negative and depressed about a possibly dark and deeply disturbing future, I think advertising can play a role in making them feel emotionally better, in order to making them feel optimistic enough to go out and say, okay, let's spend. I think we will be able to earn tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Aggie. I've been interviewing people for almost 20 years now, and I can say categorically this is the finest interview from the point of view of what my readers or viewers will learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Agnello Dias in conversation with Anant Rangaswami. Let's now take a look at the MELT cheat sheet. Honesty and trust are the core elements in any agency-client relationship. At present, it is better for clients and agencies to focus on interacting and engaging in solutions that are short-term. At the moment, advertising is relying more on technology than actual engagement with consumers. It is essential for agencies and clients to ask themselves if an ad truly resonates with the consumer. Advertising today has to play the role of a positive force in our society. It can make people optimistic and hopeful for a better tomorrow. On that note, let's move on to this week's Creative Picks. On Creative Picks today, I want to talk about a campaign that created a lot of hype on social media last week. 6 different brands, namely Cadbury Dairy Milk, Pepsi, Sunfeast Dark Fantasy, Amul Lassi, Brook Bond Red Label, and Maggi Noodles, put up outdoor ads featuring the same copy, 13th ki taiyari kijiye. This made people curious as they started wondering what could be happening on 13th July. The hoardings finally turned out to be a teaser campaign by Z Entertainment Enterprises as it was preparing to resume its daily soaps from 13th July after a 3-month lockdown. The campaign was creatively executed by Publicis India and overseen by Ajay Gahlot, Chief Creative Officer and Managing Director of Publicis Worldwide, India. Well, I think this was a really cool marketing stunt. The suspense around similar posters and 13th July grabbed a lot of eyeballs and generated conversations. Plus, how often do you see popular brands participating together in an outdoor campaign? Z also smartly approached brands that are often consumed while watching television. The whole idea was to let people know about the fresh programming of new episodes, and I think it successfully managed to communicate that to maximum people. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Melt. Do follow us on social media. Our handle is Ready to Melt. You can also stay informed on what's happening in the world of advertising and marketing with our daily Melt update on our website, readytomelt.com. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye.